Here we go. Hold on. There we go. Hi, I'm Locke. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing here. Sit back, relax, and buckle up, because we're about to go from 0 to questionably sane in however long this video turns out to be. Get hyped! So, I played a lot of driving games as a kid. I was all over pretty much anything with cars in it, as long as it also didn't have guns in it, which is why I never played Grand Theft Auto and the like. And because the current gaming scene really just doesn't impress me much of the time, I play a lot of older games. This brings us to today's game, Trackmania United. I played this game obsessively when I was young. It was always so much fun and easy to get into. I probably poured hundreds of hours into it, a shadow of what was to come. I loved this game, and it was that past love that brought me back to it. However, it's been almost 10 years since I last played this title, and going back into it with a more critical viewpoint meant it had the potential to be either really good, or more proof that child me was an idiot with idiot taste in everything. Before I can get into what I think of this game, I should probably explain what it is, since it was relatively obscure before Ubisoft bought the IP, released an utterly mediocre entry to no fanfare, and subsequently went into a 3+ year silence that still hasn't been broken as of this writing. Given how Ubisoft operates these days, I'm just gonna call that a positive. Trackmania is actually not about a Faustian power bargain to become God like the title might have you believe, but is really a series about building and racing on tracks. You drive tracks to do better at those tracks and unlock new, more difficult tracks. There's also a track making system that lets you make tracks of your own. Tracks! It strikes a balance between arcade racers and the hyper-customizable early 2000s PC games that had more depth than the Marianas Trench, which makes sense since this series started in 2003 and hasn't changed much since. And I mean that as a good thing, because the point that I've spent the past couple minutes dancing around is that this game is still really, really good. Mostly. But I'm going to cover the gameplay in a hot couple minutes, because I need to explain this game in particular. The Trackmania series has had an interesting history, starting humbly in 2003 and growing in scale until it reached the pinnacle in 2008 with Trackmania United, which contained every environment made up until that point, which was then followed by trying to do United again, but by adding carbon copies of the old environments one by one in a better engine, which was followed by the aforementioned Ubisoft purchase and the re-release of Trackmania Turbo, which in and of itself was a carbon copy of United. So United is essentially the basis for which the series tries to emulate itself after its release in 2008. Trackmania United consists of 7 environments: Stadium, Island, Desert, Rally, Bay, Coast, and Snow. Each of these have their own appearance, cars, car handling, and tracks! I'm going to discuss each of them on their own since they're almost totally separate from one another, and it makes this video so much easier to organize. I do, however, have one point to make that operates across all environments, and that's the way you need to play the game. This game cannot be played on keyboard. No matter what environment you're playing on, a level of precision is needed that keyboards just can't give. When you steer with arrow keys or A and D, you're either turning with maximum effort or you're not turning at all. Oh, but you can just tap the key repeatedly. Silence, you imbecile! I tried every single environment on keyboard and only 2 of them were potentially playable, Bay and Snow was a struggle to perform well. I can't even say a standard controller will work right because I've never gotten one to work properly, but maybe I just need to stop using broken pieces of that I bought at Radio Shack going out of business sales like a moron. So although it isn't very practical these days, I've always used one solution. Joystick. Hell yeah. This is how I always played Trackmania, as well as some other games and MechWarrior. Oh, damn, I should do a video on MechWarrior. The problem is that, although this works really well, the only reason I have this is because my dad was into late 90s flight sims. So all I know is that my joystick works well for this game, and keyboard makes the cars run like broken RC cars you find at the bargain bin of the Radio Shacks that I bought my controllers at. Whether other joysticks, controllers, or wheels work best for this game is best left to people who do better things with their time than eat garbage and wank. So while I can't talk about that, what I can talk about is the actual game. So, let's do that. Stadium is the most basic of the 7, and that's not a bad thing. While the environment is somewhat uninspired, I mean, what the f*** is this supposed to be? It serves as a good beginning, especially in the way the Stadium F1 car performs. It's fast, easy to use, and its quirks are easy to handle. On paved road, the car suffers from understeer at high speeds, so on turns you're highly encouraged to let off the accelerator to follow the ideal racing line, which adds a layer of depth beyond the simple go forward and turn a bunch of basic driving mechanics. On top of that, the car handles completely differently on dirt paths, turning much more accurately but moving a bit slower, and it changes again on grass where it moves slower still and turns like shit. Overall, though, Stadium is fun. It's a good starting place for new players, and it remains fun even after then. There's actually an entire game based on this environment. It's decent and does a lot of cool stuff with the track design. The island environment looks much prettier than Stadium, with these lush greens and sparkling seas and Island car is fast. Like, really fast. Like F1 car fast. Like F0 fast. Like, this is what kids imagine cars to be like when they haven't driven before. Like, this is a Hot Wheels speed fantasy. And I love it. What makes Island so much fun is the tangible sense of speed, but more importantly, it's the precision of the car's handling and the fact that that level of precision is required to do well. The tracks are wide and the turns seem forgiving at a distance, but because you move so quickly, they feel much smaller and offer very little margin for error. It feels like maneuvering a tightrope at a full sprint, and it's exhilarating to pull off, both because of how tight the car handles and how the tracks demand you to take full advantage of that. There's also a lot of acrobatics involved, with loops, vertical jumps, and this. Oh, Jesus, what the hell is this? Island is one of the best environments of the 7. It's challenging, but still extremely fun. Desert just really isn't very good. I'm sorry. The aesthetic is okay, combining natural structures like canyons and rivers with far more industrial set pieces like oil mining gear and parking garages. I understand those who think this is boring, but I personally find it kind of interesting. I also find the way the desert car handles to be interesting, in the sense that it's interesting to think about how anyone on the dev team thought this was acceptable. The desert car wants to handle well, and for the most part it does. Except for some understeer, it's alright, but it has this little tiny problem called the car keeps nearly tipping over. I mean, look at this. It's like the car has a second invisible car taped to the top. But what makes this even weirder is that although the car looks top-heavy in this footage, it doesn't feel top-heavy. It's like there's a second invisible car taped to the top of the first one, yes, but it's also like both the cars have the combined weight of a model Ford Escort. Get it? They're the same. You might also think that making this a visual thing would make it easier to deal with, and you're not wrong, but you're still kind of wrong. Because it's mostly visual, once you get over it, it's not really an issue, and the understeer becomes the main issue. However, until you get over that, the tipping thing keeps subconsciously telling you that you need to stop turning so hard, even though most of the time you aren't turning that hard. And I really don't know what else to say about this. Overall, Desert is fine. Not as good as most of the other environments, but fine. What the f*** is with all those goddamn parking garages? I'm not gonna lie, this is my favorite of the 7, but I can't really say why, since it kind of falls into the same category as Desert, of being generally fine except for one seriously annoying quirk. In this case, it suffers from serious oversteer on paved road. But while that's still really annoying sometimes, it's countered by 2 things. The first of those is the admittedly very subjective opinion that I just like the Middle Ages town and castle aesthetic, but more importantly, it's that it makes rally racing feel more accessible than almost any other driving game I've played, while still feeling like rally racing. Let me explain. From my experience, there are 3 ways rally racing works. The Mario Kart approach, in which they basically just retexture the ground to be dirt instead of roads or birthday cake. This is totally fine. I honestly wouldn't want that to be different. The Gran Turismo approach, which requires an MBA in chemistry and sculpture because it is an art and a science. It has an incredible level of depth and challenge, and I love it for that. And the Crew approach, which I can't really talk about much since my memory of the Crew all kind of blends together in a haze of pretty scenery and bored. Rally is closest to the Mario Kart approach, but because of how differently it handles, it doesn't feel the same as driving on the road. As the text said, it feels better. A lot better, actually. It's goddamn fun and accessible, and I can't get enough of it. Okay, so you know how I just said Rally is my favorite? Well, here's the thing. My favorite environment is Rally, but it isn't the best one. The best 2 are Island and Bay. Bay has great acceleration and snappy handling, which you wouldn't expect from an SUV, but here we are. Once again though, the track design complements the car in a way that elevates Bay from just good to really excellent. The thing about Bay is that the roads just don't have walls. The primary 3 track types are roads with walls lower than my IQ, these weird chain road things that don't have walls to begin with, and various amalgamations of concrete where the walls are improvised and are usually either buildings or the vast expanse of the sea. So whoever made Bay is not f***ing around. You mess up and you're dead. To be honest though, that's kind of how the game operates across the board. If you mess up on a track, it's best to just restart immediately. The game is designed for that though, and they have 2 dedicated do-over buttons. One to the most recent checkpoint, and one to restart the track entirely. The redo the whole track button kind of invalidates the need for a redo checkpoint button though. The redo checkpoint button doesn't reset the stopwatch, and you need to have some extremely fast times if you want to net the gold medal on every track. This makes the redo checkpoint button kind of worthless, since if you mess up, it's better to just reset the timer and try to recover a doomed run. This leads to the biggest problem with the game. It's very rooted in trial and error. Start a run, mess up, press 6 on the joystick, try again, repeat. 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 Games can work with this setup, and they have before. A game like this relies on a strong primary loop, because if the primary loop isn't fun, it makes the game a lot more frustrating than anything else. And make no mistake, it can be frustrating. Heck. 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 God! For the... God! However, the game really never gets to that level of frustration, and that's its biggest strength. The handling of the vehicles all have their quirks, but they're all fun to drive. Mostly. So before I spend the next several minutes thrashing the coast environment, I do want to get the one thing I like out of the way. This is one of the most visually appealing environments in my opinion. It has the same series of islands as Island, but it has more of a Mediterranean vibe to it. And I like that. You want to know what I don't like though? This f***ing car. The Coast car has some of the worst handling I've ever experienced in a racing game. It has the understeer problem like some other cars, but it's made a million times worse by the absolutely garbage traction. It hardly turns until a certain point, but after that it loses all traction and starts sliding around like Stephen Hawking on an ice rink. And I think I get what they were trying to go for. The intent seems to be to make an environment where you have to drift through corners to get good times on your run. And I think that could work, but why would you do that for an environment where the car is already so large? It takes up a third of the normal track already, and the way the camera is so close to it makes it look even larger. I really want to like this car, but it's more finicky than a scared cat, and when you try turning at any speed faster than what school zones mandate, it handles like a hot air balloon driven by a person on acid who currently doesn't know how to drive, or why they're in the air, or why spiders are coming out of their hands. Cutting to the exact opposite of the spectrum, we have the snow area, complete with the snappiest car of the 7 to an almost annoying degree. You might think that this is a weird claim to make, that a car handles too well, but you've gotten this far, so now I can take advantage of the sunk cost fallacy, and I can tell you anything I want. Okay. So, the music. I haven't brought up the music since, for the most part, it's perfectly fine. Stadium in particular. Mostly it's just noise. However, there's one track in particular that really just puts a sparrow in my flesh wounds. You may feel blood running down your neck. This is because your ears are bleeding and you can no longer hear. This is good for me because now I won't get yelled at for saying, "Oh, I forgot about the car handling. Oh no, they're gonna hate me now." I said that the car handled too well, and I want to circle back to that. The problem is that it's way too tightly strung. Tapping the steering will set you moving in a different compass direction. This causes you to undercompensate for steering rather than act normal or slightly overcompensate. While this is actually okay for the most part, it leads to me feeling like I'm less satisfied with the victory since I feel like I'm barely able to keep the car on the track. I would still argue that this is fun though, because at its best you get to whip around 90-degree turns at full speed and that never stops being exciting. Just don't stay on the straightaways because it never feels like you're doing it correctly. So the game has a lot of content, with 4 sets of 5 tracks and a culminating challenge for each, plus other modes that, while light on content, are fun little distractions. But there's also a robust track building tool, allowing you to make new content from scratch to the same degree of quality or better, since everything the normal tracks use can be used in this building tool. Now, you might say that this was blatant pandering to child me, who loved both cars and games that allowed for me to express my creativity. And you might say it's not good criticism to give this tool glowing praise when it can be a mild inconvenience to not have depth perception. And you might say I'm a nostalgia-blinded idiot who's just going to gush about how much he loves building custom content. And you're right! This feature admittedly isn't for everyone, as I get that some people will just want to play a game and don't care about making their own stuff. But I love stuff and I love making stuff, so this speaks to me and my inner child more than the subliminal messages the Catholic Church implanted in my brain during primary school. I love it. I just love it. I love this sort of thing. It's just so much fun. I love when games include this stuff. It's just the best thing ever. I have so much fun building things. Look, I built a rally track. It goes through a farm. This game admittedly isn't perfect. It suffers from generic environments, occasionally annoying quirks in the driving, and coast, but I cannot stress enough how this game is just plain fun. It gives a sense of inhumanly fast speed, except coast, but retains a feeling of control that makes driving feel fun and responsive, except coast. You always feel like you're totally in control, except coast, and when you mess up, it's on you. And when you win, it feels more satisfying than most of the games I've played this year or last year. If you like driving games and you can figure out the controller issue, I highly recommend this. Except coast.